Right now, it's time to welcome our Washington correspondent, John Gallagher, to the show. John, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hi, guys. Thanks. How you guys doing in your pools?
Not good. I'm not doing good.
Me neither.
Yeah, and all I cared about was New Mexico State, so the show's over for me.
Oh, that's right. That's your school, isn't it?
Because it is, it is. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Of course, it's Monday, so we're excited to have you. And I'm interested in this story because this one came up and I was kind of curious. Sounds like the government is getting in on some of this freight and transportation data, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Federal Maritime Commission has been doing this too, but now the White House is doing it from a domestic side. So basically, the White House announced that the DOT is going to be overseeing this. Basically, it's a pilot project for data transparency among the different players in the supply chain. So it's basically, from what I understand, it's supposed to be like a portal or like a data exchange for people to kind of go to one place to share information. I mean, and it's all about trying to avoid these future supply chain disruptions that we saw over the last 2 years, so it's basicly making the argument that while it's technically feasible, I mean, all this data is out there now, but it's not being. There's no sort of clearinghouse for it that everyone can kind of tap into, like rails, trucks, carriers, warehousing, drayage, and also it's not just having one place, but just having more visibility into some loading and transfer information. So, for example, FedEx recently said that if they had a wish list, they would. This is FedEx, as an ocean freight forwarder in their capacity as a freight forwarder. They told the Federal Maritime Commission that they would like to see things like container stow plans. They would like to see docking and berthing times, the times, the scheduling for the longshore crew when they start to actually work the ships. I was a little surprised because I kind of thought all this was available, but I mean, FedEx says it wasn't, at least not on a wide basis. They were saying that you could go to an individual carrier or an individual marine terminal or an individual warehouse and get their information, but it wasn't all connected. So into like a central database. So for this pilot, DOT, so like I said, they want to use it as a proof of concept. So by the end of the summer, to come up with some potentially like a permanent exchange. And the initial players in this are going to be, they have 18 companies and entities that are sort of participating in the pilot. And it's the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, two of the major ocean carriers. C.H. Robinson from the trucking side is going to be participating. They've got importers like Albertsons, Land O'Lakes, Target, and FedEx and Prologis. UPS is going to be sort of on the logistics side. But I was told, someone emailed me and they said, notably absent from these 18 initial participants in the pilot project is a technology company that would presumably put all this together and actually figure out how it would actually work on a technology level, because everyone acknowledges that the government should not have a role in actually operating this thing. They're not very good at technology, and there's they could be seen as they could lend itself to like the whims of politics as well. So, but they do it. The government does have a role in kind of getting the parties together and kind of supporting it, and even maybe playing a role in having like grant money available that for training people to use the system once it's up and running. So anyway, by the end of the summer, we'll see if this pilot actually works and gets up and running and translates into something that's permanent that the industry can use.
So, John, I'm really interested in this story because isn't this exactly what companies and visibility providers like FourKites and Project 44 are trying to do? Like, this is kind of their ultimate goal, correct? And as you mentioned, it's interesting to not have a tech company as one of those players in those 18 initial stakeholders. Do you think that it's kind of a competition aspect, maybe for the reason for the government leaving people like FourKites and Project 44 out of this, especially when they kind of have this established understanding of how to gather this data and refine it in their database?
Yeah, no, that's a big reason. They don't want, the phrase picking winners and losers in this thing, and the industry again, they sort of acknowledge that they don't want that either. And that's sort of what's been holding this back for a long time. Because like I said, this data has always been out there. And whenever there was issues like labor shortages or, labor disruptions or natural disasters, things like that screwed up the supply chain, everyone would talk about this like over the last 20 years, like what we need a central place. But it sort of never got off the ground just because, that reason everyone was afraid of, proprietary information. The private companies were afraid of getting their own proprietary information and sharing that stuff. But it's just, you don't have to share proprietary information to make a big step up in this. Just basic, if everyone's on the same page in terms of when there's all different definitions of what constitutes a ship at berth. Some ocean carriers designate being at berth is when it hits the dock, but others say it's when the gantry crane actually connects to the ship. And that's when it's in the system as at birth. So everyone has not been on the same page up until now on definitions and what those things mean. So like you said, that these companies have been there. There are partnerships out there, like I think Trade Lens is one between Maersk and IBM. That's sort of a partnership that does it part of the on the maritime side, but they're sort of spotty in all different places. So this would kind of bring everything together, basically.
And John, when you're looking at this, are there any blind spots that you see popping up on some of these list of participants? Of course, everyone really has a wide range of expertise here, but some of the things, of course, that's coming to the top of my mind, I'm always going to talk about it, is flatbed and what some of the upstream might look like. But is there anything that comes to mind or kind of jumps out at you that, hey, this might be a little bit of a blind spot, even if it's a smaller part of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, it could, one of the things, one of the big problems has been on the domestic side with this whole supply chain disruption are these inland connections. Not just, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about on the ocean side at, where they actually unload the ships and the drayage companies getting access to those warehouses at LA and Long Beach. But there's other side that we've talked about, but not quite as much as the connections like in St. Louis or Chicago or Memphis, where you have these inland drayage connections that's been disrupting things on the domestic side. So I sort of wonder if there's been we've had a port envoy from the White House, and so in the name it's port. So it seems to me that if you're going to get this whole work out all the kinks, it has to be done. It has to be done inland as well, and so that might be a blind spot in terms of like those drayage connections inland. Anthony, if that sort of answers your question.
It definitely does.
And I'm going to follow that up too with the potential for blind spots in the land border crossings with Mexico and Canada as well. Was there any talk about looking at carrier stakes in those places as well?
No, not that I heard of, but that's obviously important. I mean, that we're having this CP rail shutdown right now. Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and it wasn't, but maybe that will sort of kind of. I mean, again, this is a pilot project, and it's just supposed to be getting this like sort of proof of concept. So the expectation is that it's going to grow from there. So maybe, I mean, that definitely those cross border things are just as important for our export markets and import markets as well.
All right, John, what are you working on this week as far as top stories go? What can we look out for on freightwaves.com?
So let's see. I'm actually, I had mentioned the FMC earlier on that they have their own sort of data exchange project going. So I'm going to be I'm going to be interviewing with a commissioner that's kind of heading that up, and just to see where things stand on that side, and also the Ocean Shipping Reform Act in the Senate bill is starting to make its way for discussion. So I'll be monitoring to see how that sort of moves along this week as well.
All right, John, thank you as always for joining us. Great to have you, and have a good week.
Thanks, you guys.